The night is slowly fading. There is no sudden change, no sharp moment where darkness disappears. Instead, the sky begins to soften, little by little, like a quiet breath spreading across the horizon. A pale gray light stretches gently over the land. The air is cool, carrying a softness that will not last long. Soon, the warmth will return. But for now, everything feels calm, almost still. The Nile rests quietly. Its surface moves in slow, patient lines, reflecting the early sky above. There are no loud sounds here. Only the gentle movement of water, touching the shore again and again, as it has done for countless years. Along the river, the land is dark and rich. Beyond it, the desert waits. Dry. Silent. Endless. But here, near the water, life gathers. Small villages sit close to the Nile, built from earth and straw, shaped by hands that have repeated the same motions across generations. The homes are simple, low, and strong in their own quiet way. Inside one of these homes, someone begins to wake. There is no alarm. No sudden noise. Only habit. Only the quiet understanding that the day must begin. A woman opens her eyes slowly. For a moment, she remains still, listening. The world outside is not yet busy. There are no loud voices, no heavy footsteps. Only a distant sound, the river, always there, always present. She sits up carefully. The floor beneath her is firm and cool. The walls hold the memory of the night air, protecting the inside from the coming heat. A faint light enters through a small opening, touching the edges of the room. She reaches for a clay jar nearby. It is empty. It feels light in her hands. Too light. And that tells her what must be done. Water must be brought. Not later. Not after rest. But now, while the air is still gentle. She stands. The movement is slow, practiced. There is no rush, no wasted energy. Every motion is simple, controlled, shaped by years of repetition. Outside, the village begins to stir. Another door opens. Then another. A soft pattern forms, people waking, stepping out, preparing for the same task. Each person knows what the morning requires. There is no need to speak it aloud. The woman steps onto the path. The ground is slightly uneven, packed by many footsteps over time. Fine dust rests on its surface, cool for now, waiting for the heat of the sun to warm it. She adjusts the cloth on her head. This cloth matters. It will help balance the jar later, when it is no longer light, when it becomes something much heavier, something that presses down with quiet strength. She begins to walk. The path winds gently through the village. Low walls cast soft shadows. A few animals shift in place, not yet fully awake. Somewhere, a bird calls once, then falls silent again. The world is not loud here. It moves slowly. As she walks, others join. Another woman carries a jar on her hip. A young girl follows closely behind her, holding a smaller container. An older figure walks with steady steps, her posture showing years of the same journey. They do not need to speak. Their presence is enough. They all move in the same direction. Toward the river. The Nile grows closer with each step. Its presence can be felt before it is fully seen. The air near it is different, slightly cooler, slightly softer. There is a faint scent of water and earth, a quiet reminder of its importance. When they reach the edge, the land slopes gently downward. The soil is darker here, damp in places. and the water waits. Still calm. Still patient. Each person finds a place. There is no pushing, no rushing forward. Everyone understands the rhythm. Everyone knows that the river will not disappear. The woman steps closer. She kneels slightly, lowering her jar toward the surface. The movement is careful. Very careful. The jar touches the water. For a moment, it floats lightly. Then she tilts it. Water begins to enter. Slowly at first, then more steadily. The sound is soft. A gentle filling. A quiet change from empty to full. She watches closely. Not because she doubts the process, but because attention matters. A small mistake could tip the jar, could waste effort, could make the journey harder. The jar grows heavier. She can feel it in her hands. The shift is gradual, but clear. From light, to solid. From empty, to full. When it is ready, she lifts it. The weight is real now. It presses downward. But her body knows how to respond. She rises slowly, keeping her balance, adjusting her stance. Then, with practiced ease, she lifts the jar higher, guiding it toward her head, where the cloth waits to support it. The jar settles. Steady. Balanced. Secure. Around her, the same motions repeat. Again and again. Different people, same rhythm. Different hands, same task. And in that repetition, there is something quiet, something steady, something that does not change easily. The return begins. The path back to the village is the same, but it feels different now. The weight changes everything. Steps become more careful. Movements become more measured. There is no room for sudden actions. Only calm, steady walking. The sun has risen a little higher. Its light touches the land more clearly now. Shadows begin to shorten. The air slowly loses its coolness. But still, the pace remains slow. There is no reason to hurry. There is only the journey. Step by step. Breath by breath. The village appears again. The same homes. The same paths. But now, they are part of the next stage. Inside each home, the water will be placed, stored, protected, used carefully, shared quietly. The woman reaches her doorway. She pauses for a moment, adjusting the jar before lowering it. The movement is controlled, deliberate. She bends slightly, guiding the jar down until it rests safely on the ground. The weight is gone. Her body feels lighter. But the work it carried remains. Water now sits inside the home. Still. Cool. Waiting. It will not stay untouched for long. Hands will reach for it. Small amounts will be poured. Used with care. Because this is not just water. It is the beginning of the day. And the day will continue, slowly, gently, just like the river itself. The morning has now fully arrived. The soft gray light from before has turned into a pale gold that rests gently across the village. The sun is not yet harsh, but it is no longer distant. Its warmth begins to settle into touching the walls of each home, the narrow paths, the quiet corners where shadows still remain. Inside the homes, the water waits. It sits in clay jars, still and cool, held within thick walls shaped by careful hands. The surface of the water is calm, almost like a mirror that no one disturbs unless it is needed. And it will be needed. Again and again. Throughout the day. A hand reaches into the jar. Not quickly, not carelessly, but with a small awareness, a quiet understanding that this water has been carried, step by step, from the river. The effort remains in every drop. A small cup is dipped inside. Lifted. The water moves gently as it is poured into another container. A few drops fall back, making soft sounds against the clay. Nothing is wasted on purpose. Even the smallest movement feels measured. Nearby, a fire begins to form. Thin pieces of dry plant matter are placed together. A spark is brought carefully. Smoke rises slowly, curling into the morning air. The smell is soft, familiar, part of everyday life. Water is added to a pot. Grains may follow. Or perhaps simple vegetables. The exact meal does not matter as much as the process itself. The slow combining of water and food. The quiet transformation that happens with heat. Everything begins with water. Outside, the village grows more active. Footsteps become more frequent. Voices, still soft, begin to appear. Not loud conversations, not sharp sounds, but gentle exchanges, short words, simple greetings, the quiet sharing of presence. A child walks past, carrying a very small container. It is not heavy. Not yet. But it is a beginning. Learning starts early here. Not through long explanations, but through watching, through doing, through repeating the same small actions day after day until they become natural. The child watches how the jar is held, how the water is poured, how the container is placed back without spilling. These things matter. Because water is not just used. It is respected. As the sun rises higher, the warmth becomes more noticeable. The coolness of the early morning begins to fade. The ground feels different underfoot. The air becomes thicker, slower. And inside the homes, the water begins its quiet work. Some of it is used for drinking. Small amounts, taken carefully. The water is cool against the lips. It carries a softness that feels almost calming in the growing heat. It moves through the body, bringing relief in a way that is simple but deeply understood. Some of it is used for washing. Hands are dipped into small bowls. Faces are cleaned slowly, gently. The movement of water across skin feels refreshing, even if only for a moment. Even this is done with care. No splashing. No excess. Only what is needed. Because every drop came from effort. And every drop must last. In another part of the village, someone prepares to leave again. The jar inside their home is not empty, but it is not full enough to last the entire day. This is common. Water is not carried once and forgotten. It is carried again. And again. The path to the Nile never rests for long. A man steps outside, lifting a container made from a different shape of clay. It is wider, perhaps meant for a different kind of use. The design may change slightly, but the purpose remains the same. To carry water. He begins to walk. The sun is higher now. The journey will feel warmer. The air does not offer the same gentle coolness as before. But still, the pace is steady. There is no sense of frustration in the movement. Only acceptance. This is how life continues. This is how it has always been. The path is quieter than before, but not empty. Others are walking too. Some returning. Some going. The rhythm continues, even as the day moves forward. At the river, the light reflects more strongly now. The surface of the water shines, carrying the brightness of the sky. Small ripples break the reflection, spreading outward in slow patterns. The man steps closer. He lowers his container. The same careful motion. The same quiet filling. Water enters again. And once again, something empty becomes full. Something light becomes heavy. He lifts it. Adjusts his grip. Begins the walk back. The weight presses into his arms this time, rather than his head. Each method of carrying has its own feeling. Its own balance. Its own quiet challenge. But all of them share the same truth. Water is not easy to carry. And yet, it is carried every day. Back in the village, the midday approaches. The light grows stronger. Shadows shrink. The warmth becomes something that cannot be ignored. People move more slowly now. The pace of the morning shifts into something softer. Less movement. More stillness. Inside the homes, the water continues to be used. A little more for cooking. A little more for drinking. A small amount poured for an animal waiting quietly in the shade. Even the animals understand the rhythm. They wait. They drink. They step back. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. The jars slowly become lighter. Not all at once. But little by little. And as they do, the need begins to return. Not urgently. Not suddenly. But steadily. Like the river itself. Always present. Always moving. Always needed. In the quiet of the afternoon, when the heat is at its highest, some rest. They sit in shaded areas. They remain still. They allow their bodies to recover from the morning's work and to prepare for what may come later. The jars remain nearby. Within reach. A reminder. A quiet presence. Holding what has been gathered. Holding what will soon be needed again. Time passes slowly. There is no rush to it. No sudden change. Only a gradual shift as the sun begins, very gently, to move downward once more. And as it does, the thought returns again. Water must be carried. Not loudly. Not as a burden that is spoken. But as a quiet truth that exists beneath everything else. The river is still there. Waiting. As it always does. And soon, footsteps will return to the path. Soft. Steady. Patient. Just like before. The afternoon settles gently over the village. The brightness of midday begins to soften, almost without notice. The sharp light fades into something warmer, something quieter. Shadows stretch slowly along the, growing longer with each passing moment. The heat is still there, but it no longer presses as strongly. There is a small sense of relief. A light breeze may pass through, touching the of the Nile, moving across the open spaces, slipping quietly between the homes. It does not stay long, but even its brief presence is enough to be felt. Inside the homes, the jars are no longer as full as they were in the morning. The water has been used, little by little. Carefully. Quietly. For drinking. For food. For washing. For the small, necessary acts that shape the day. Now, the weight of the jars has changed. They feel lighter. And that lightness carries a quiet message. More water will soon be needed. A woman rises from her place near the doorway. She pauses for a moment, not because she is unsure, but because the movement itself is slow. Her body carries the memory of the day, the morning walk, the weight of the jar, the warmth of the sun. She reaches for the container again. It is not completely empty. But it is not enough. That is how it often is. Water is rarely carried just once. It returns again and again, like a quiet cycle that never fully ends. She steps outside. The village feels different now. Not as still as the early morning. Not as active as midday. But somewhere in between. A gentle in-between moment. A few people move along the paths. Some are finishing small tasks. Others are already preparing for the evening. A child sits near a wall, tracing shapes into the dust with slow fingers. Nearby, an older figure watches quietly, saying nothing. The woman adjusts the cloth on her head again. The same cloth from the morning. It has not moved far from where it was placed. These small items stay close. They are part of the routine. Part of the quiet system that keeps everything moving. She begins to walk. The path is familiar in a way that does not need thought. Her feet know where to step. Her body knows how to move. There is no need to look down, no need to question it has been walked too many times. The sun rests lower now, casting a softer glow across the land. The colors change slightly. The takes on a warmer tone. The walls of the home seem to hold more light. Even the Nile appears different, reflecting the shifting sky with a calm, steady surface. Others are walking too. The afternoon journey is quieter than the morning one. Fewer voices. Fewer groups. But the same purpose. Each person carries a container. Each step leads toward the river. A young boy walks carefully, holding a small jar with both hands. His movements are slower than the others. His attention is focused, steady, as if each step is something to be learned. Nearby, an older woman walks with ease. Her posture is steady. Her steps are even. She does not look at the ground. She does not hesitate. Time has shaped her movements into something smooth, something practiced beyond thought. They all reach the river in their own time. The Nile remains as it always is. Unchanged. Patient. Its surface moves gently, reflecting the soft gold of the late afternoon sky. The light dances quietly across the water, shifting with each small ripple. The near the edge is cool in places. Darker. Slightly damp. The woman steps closer. She lowers her jar again. The same motion as before. Slow. Careful. The jar touches the water. For a moment, everything feels still. Then, as she tilts it, the water begins to enter. The sound is soft. A quiet filling. A gentle movement that has been repeated so many times that it feels almost like part of the river itself. The jar grows heavy. Once again. The shift is familiar. Expected. She lifts it slowly. Her arms adjust. Her body responds. The jar rises, guided carefully onto her head, where the cloth waits. The balance settles. Not perfectly at first. But close enough. Then, with a small adjustment, it becomes steady. Secure. Around her, others do the same. Different hands. Different containers. Same rhythm. Same quiet process. No one rushes. No one speaks loudly. The river does not demand speed. And neither do the people. The return begins again. The path back to the village feels longer now, even though it has not changed. The body feels the weight more clearly in the afternoon. The warmth of the day lingers. The is warmer beneath each step. But still, the pace remains slow. Measured. Careful. A bird moves across the sky above, its shadow passing briefly over the path. Then it is gone. The moment passes without sound. The woman continues walking. Step by step. The jar remains steady. Each movement is controlled. Each breath is quiet. The village slowly comes back into view. The same homes. The same walls. The same paths. But now touched by the softer light of the evening. Shadows stretch longer across the ground. The air begins to change again. Not cool yet. But no longer heavy. Just softer. She reaches her home. She pauses at the entrance. Then slowly lowers the jar. The weight leaves her body once more. The water rests again inside the home. Still. Calm. Ready to be used. The cycle continues. Inside, the water is poured into smaller containers. Some is set aside for the evening meal. Some is kept for drinking. A small amount may be used for washing away the dust of the day. Each action is slow. Each movement is careful. Nothing feels rushed. Outside, the village begins to quiet again. The sounds soften. Footsteps become fewer. Voices fade into low tones. The day is slowly moving toward its end. But the presence of water remains. Always there. Always needed. The jars sit quietly in their places. Holding what was carried. Holding what will be used. Holding the effort of the day. And as the light continues to fade, as the sky begins to shift once more, the river remains in the distance. Still flowing. Still waiting. For tomorrow. For the next journey. For the same quiet steps that will return again, just as they always have. The evening light begins to settle more deeply across the village. It does not arrive all at once. It comes slowly, as if the day itself is learning how to rest. The golden tones soften into a quiet amber, and the seems to hold that light for a little while before letting it fade. Inside the homes, the water rests in its jars. Still. Quiet. Held within walls of clay that were shaped long before this day began. These jars are not simple objects. They carry more than water. They carry memory, skill, repetition, and a quiet understanding of what is needed. Each one has been made by hand. Long ago, or perhaps not so long ago, someone sat near a patch of soft earth, gathering clay from the river's edge. The clay was cool to the touch, slightly damp, easy to shape but not without effort. Hands pressed into it. Slowly. Carefully. Turning it. Lifting it. Shaping it into something that could hold water without letting it escape. The form matters. Too thin, and it may break. Too thick, and it becomes too heavy to carry. The opening must be just right. Wide enough to fill. Narrow enough to reduce spilling. Every curve has a purpose. Every line has been learned through time. The clay was turned, perhaps on a simple wheel, or shaped entirely by steady hands. The surface was smoothed in some places, left slightly rough in others. Then it was left to dry. Not quickly. Not in harsh heat. But slowly, under watchful care. After that, it was fired. Hardened by controlled heat, until it became something strong enough to carry water day after day. When it was finished, it became part of the home. Part of the routine. Part of life. In the quiet of the evening, one of these jars sits near the doorway. Its surface holds faint marks from its making. Small lines, tiny imperfections, places where the hand once pressed a little more firmly. These marks are not mistakes. They are signs. They tell the story of how the jar came to be. and now, it holds water. Cooler than the air around it? Protected by the thickness of the clay. This is not by chance. The material itself helps the water remain fresh. A small amount of moisture passes slowly through the clay, cooling the surface as the air moves around it. It is a quiet system. A natural balance. Nothing forced. Nothing rushed. Just the way things have always been. A woman steps closer to the jar. She rests her hand against its side for a moment. The surface feels slightly cool. She lifts a small cup. Dips it gently into the water. Lifts it again. The movement is slow. Unhurried. She drinks. Only what is needed. Then she lowers the cup. Places it back. Nothing more. Outside, another figure prepares to move again. Not toward the river this time, but simply across the village. Even now, the jars play a role. Some are carried short distances. From one place to another. From one home to another. Sharing happens quietly. If one household has less, another may offer a little. Not as a large gesture. Not as something to be announced. But as a simple action. A quiet understanding that water belongs to the rhythm of the whole village. The way the jars are carried changes depending on the person. Some balance them on the head. This method allows the arms to rest. But it requires balance. Focus. A steady posture. The cloth placed beneath the jar helps create a small cushion. It also stabilizes the base, allowing the jar to sit more securely. The spine remains straight. They are even. Each step is placed carefully, one after the other. There is a gentle rhythm to it. Almost like a slow, silent movement of dance. Others carry the jars on their hips. This method allows for more control with the hands. One arm wraps around the side of the jar. The other may support it from below. The weight rests against the body. Close. Steady. It moves slightly with each step, but never too much. Then there are those who carry with both hands. Especially when the container is larger. Or when the distance is shorter. This method requires strength in the arms. But it offers a different kind of control. The jar is held in front. Close to the center. Balanced through effort rather than posture. Each method has its place. Each one has been learned through repetition. There is no single correct way. Only the way that works for the person, the jar, and the distance. As the light continues to fade, the village grows quieter. The paths that were once active begin to empty. The footsteps slow. The voices soften. Somewhere, a final small trip may still be made. A last jar filled before the darkness settles fully. Not because it must be done urgently. But because it feels right to prepare. To be ready for the night. The Nile, in the distance, reflects the changing sky. The colors deepen. From gold to soft orange. From orange to a quiet, fading blue. Its movement does not change. It remains steady. Constant. The same as it was in the morning. The same as it will be tomorrow. Inside the homes, the water waits again. Held within clay. Protected. Respected. Used slowly. The jars stand quietly in their places. Some near walls. Some near doorways. Some in shaded corners where the air remains cooler even as the night approaches. Hands will reach for them again. But not often now. The day is ending. The need becomes less frequent. Smaller. Softer. A final drink before rest. A small amount for washing away the dust that settled throughout the day. Then stillness. The kind of stillness that feels complete. The kind that comes after a full day of small, repeated effort. The jars remain. Unmoving. Holding what was carried. Holding what will be needed again. And beyond the village, beyond the quiet homes and resting, the river continues its slow, endless flow. Waiting. Always waiting. For the morning. For the footsteps. For the quiet return of hands and clay and water, moving together once more in the same gentle rhythm. The light of day has now softened into evening. A quiet blue begins to spread across the sky, gently replacing the warm tones that rested over the village before. The last traces of sunlight linger for a moment, touching the tops of the still jars resting near doorways. Then, slowly, the light fades. Night does not arrive suddenly here. It comes in layers. Soft. Gradual. Patient. Inside the homes, the water remains. It is not touched as often now. The need has slowed. Movements are smaller. Voices are lower. The day has taken what it required, and now it begins to settle into rest. But even in this quiet, the role of water does not disappear. It remains close. A quiet presence. Waiting. A child moves toward one of the jars. Small hands reach carefully. Not with carelessness, not with play, but with a growing sense of understanding. The child has watched this many times before. The way the jar is approached. The way the water is taken. The way it is never wasted. The child dips a small cup. Lifts it. Pauses. Then drinks slowly. There is no rush even here. Learning happens through quiet repetition. Not through words. Not through instructions spoken loudly. But through seeing, through doing, through feeling the weight of simple actions. Nearby, an older figure watches. Not closely. Not with pressure. But with a calm awareness. The knowledge will come. It always does. In this village, every person becomes part of the rhythm. Not because they are told to, but because life itself moves in that way. The next morning will come. And with it, the walk to the river. The lifting of jars. The careful steps. The same movements repeated again. And so, even in the quiet of night, the pattern continues, resting, but never gone. Beyond the homes, beyond the stillness of the village, the Nile flows in the darkness. Its surface reflects faint light from the sky above. Small ripples move outward, unseen but constant. The water does not stop. It never has. It never will. But the river is not always the same. There are times when it changes. Slowly. Deeply. Over the course of seasons. When the distant rains fall far away, in lands unseen by the village, the Nile begins to rise. At first, the change is small. Almost unnoticeable. The edge of the water moves slightly. The soil near the bank becomes softer. Darker. Then, over time, the river grows fuller. It spreads outward. The near it becomes covered in water. Fields that were once dry become submerged. The paths near the edge disappear beneath a quiet layer of moving water. This is the flood. Not sudden. Not violent in this place. But steady. Expanding. Transforming the shape of the land. During this time, carrying water becomes different. The distance to the river may feel shorter in some places, longer in others. The usual paths are changed. New routes must be found. People adapt quietly. They always have. They walk where the ground allows. They step carefully where the soil is soft. They adjust their movements without complaint. Because the river gives, and the river takes. And both are accepted. The flood brings something important. When the water eventually recedes, it leaves behind dark soil. Rich. Soft. Full of life. This soil supports the crops. The food. The animals. The people. And so, even though the flood changes the simple act of carrying water, it also strengthens everything else. The village understands this. Not in words, but in experience. Generation after generation has seen the same pattern. The river rises. The land changes. The water is carried in new ways. Then the river returns to its place. And the cycle continues. In the dry seasons, the river becomes narrower again. The near the banks hardens. Paths return. The familiar routes reappear. Walking becomes easier. More predictable. But the effort remains. Water is still carried. Every day. Without pause. Without question. Back in the village, roles form naturally among the people. Some carry more. Some carry less. Not because of strict rules, but because of ability, strength, and time. A younger person may carry a larger jar. An older person may carry a smaller one. A child may carry only a little. But each action matters. Each step contributes to the whole. There is no single moment where everything depends on one person. Instead, it is shared. Spread across many small efforts. A quiet system built on repetition and balance. In the early morning, groups may form more easily. People walk together. Not for conversation. Not for noise. But simply because their paths align. In the afternoon, the walks may be more solitary. Each person moving at their own pace. At their own time. Still, the rhythm remains connected. Everyone depends on the same river. Everyone follows the same quiet pattern. Inside the homes, the jars continue their silent work. Holding. Cooling. Waiting. They do not change from day to day. But the hands that use them do. Over time, a child grows. The small cup becomes a larger one. The light container becomes heavier. The careful steps become more confident. Eventually, the child walks the full path. Carries the full jar. Balances the weight. Without thinking. Without effort beyond what is necessary. This is how knowledge moves forward. Not through written lines. Not through spoken lessons. But through lived moments. Repeated until they become part of the body itself. The evening deepens. The sky grows darker. Stars begin to appear, faint at first, then clearer as the night settles fully. The village becomes quiet. Very quiet. Only small sounds remain. A soft movement. A distant animal. The gentle presence of life continuing, even in rest. The jars remain where they are. Still. Holding the water gathered throughout the day. Some are nearly full. Some are lighter. But all of them carry the same meaning. Effort. Patience. Continuity. And as the night stretches on, the river continues its silent journey. Flowing. Endless. Unchanging in its motion, even as everything around it shifts slowly through time. And somewhere, in the quiet stillness before sleep, the thought exists again, soft, unspoken, familiar. Tomorrow, the path will be walked again. The jars will be lifted again. The water will be carried again. Just as it always has been. Just as it always will be. The night slowly gives way once more. Not suddenly, not with sharp change, but with a soft light that begins to return to the sky. The stars fade gently, one by one, as the horizon becomes pale again. The village rests in that quiet moment between night and morning. Inside the homes, the jars are still. The water within them has not moved much. It has remained calm through the night, protected by the clay, sheltered from the warmth that will soon return. If a hand touches the surface of the jar now, it will feel cool. Not cold, but softly cool. Comforting. This is something the people understand without needing to explain. The clay holds the water in a certain way. It allows a small amount of moisture to pass through its surface, so slowly that it is almost invisible. As this happens, the outer layer of the jar cools slightly when the air moves around it. It is a quiet process. A natural one. Nothing forced. Nothing designed with complex tools. And yet, it works. The water inside remains more pleasant to drink, even as the day grows warmer. This is one of the many small understandings that exist in the village. Not written down. Not spoken as rules. But known. Felt. Used every day. A woman wakes again. Her movements are familiar now, shaped by the same rhythm that has guided her for so long. She sits up, looks toward the jar, and knows what it holds. How much remains? How much will be needed? She lifts a small cup. Dips it gently. The water moves softly. She drinks. Slowly. There is no rush. There never is. Even thirst is met with calm here. Because everything depends on balance. Too much, too quickly, would only lead to less later. Outside, the first footsteps begin again. The cycle continues. But before the morning journey fully begins, there are small tasks to be done. A cloth is adjusted. A jar is checked for cracks. These jars, though strong, are not unbreakable. Over time, small lines may form along their surface. A thin crack may appear, almost invisible at first. If it grows, the jar may begin to leak. This cannot be ignored. Water is too important. So the jars are cared for. If a crack is small, it may be sealed with simple materials. A paste made from natural substances may be pressed into the line, allowed to dry, and tested slowly. If the jar can no longer hold water, it is not thrown away without thought. It may be used for other purposes. To store dry goods. To hold tools. To sit quietly in the corner, still useful in a different way. Nothing is wasted easily. Everything finds a place. As the light grows stronger, the morning walk begins again. The path fills with quiet movement. The same steps. The same direction. The same purpose. And yet, each day feels slightly different. The air may be cooler one morning. Warmer the next. A faint breeze may pass through. Or the air may remain still. These small changes are noticed. Not spoken loudly. But felt. The beneath the feet may feel firmer, or softer, depending on the season. The river may sit a little higher, or a little lower. These details shape the experience of carrying water. They change the effort, even if only slightly. At the river, the process continues. The jars are lowered. The water fills them. The weight returns. Always the weight. It is never light. And yet, it is never unexpected. The body learns to accept it, to move with it, to balance it. In time, the weight becomes something familiar, something that belongs to the day, just like the sun and the path and the quiet sound of water entering clay. As the day moves forward, the warmth returns again. The sun climbs. The air thickens. And the water inside the jars begins its quiet transformation. Some of it will slowly warm, especially if the jar is placed in a spot where the light reaches it. But those kept in shaded areas remain cooler for longer. This is why placement matters. Where the jar is placed inside the home is not random. It is chosen carefully. A corner that remains in shadow. A place where air can move gently around the surface. These small choices help preserve the water. Help it last. Help it remain useful throughout the day. Evaporation happens slowly. Not enough to be seen clearly, but enough to be understood over time. If water is left uncovered, a small amount will disappear. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. But steadily. And so, containers are often covered. A simple lid. A piece of cloth. Something to protect what is inside. These are small actions. But they matter. They always matter. In the heat of midday, the value of cool water becomes even clearer. A person sits in the shade. The air around them feels heavy. Still. A cup of water is lifted. Drunk slowly. The feeling spreads through the body. A quiet relief. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just enough. Just right. The body settles again. The breath slows. The moment passes. But its effect remains. In this way, water does more than support life. It shapes how the day feels. It influences movement, rest, energy, even thought. As the afternoon approaches, the need begins again. The jars grow lighter. The cycle returns. Another walk. Another filling. Another careful journey back. And in all of this, there is a quiet understanding. Water is not separate from life here. It is woven into it. Every action touches it. Every moment depends on it. From the first step in the morning, to the last quiet drink at night. The river continues. The jars continue. The people continue. All moving together in a rhythm that does not need to be changed. Does not need to be improved. It simply is. Steady. Endless. Calm. And as the sun begins, once again, to move downward toward the evening, the same thoughts return. Soft. Familiar. Unspoken. Tomorrow will come. The path will be walked. The jars will be lifted. The water will be carried. Again, the morning returns once more, slow and quiet. Light spreads gently across the land, touching the edges of the village in soft layers. The Nile reflects that light again, just as it always does, holding the sky within its calm surface. But not every morning feels the same. Some days are warmer even before the sun has fully risen. The air carries less coolness. The fields dry beneath the feet from the very beginning. On days like this, the act of carrying water changes in small but important ways. People begin a little earlier. Their steps are just as slow, just as steady, but there is a quiet awareness that the heat will come sooner. The path to the river fills again. Familiar faces. Familiar jars. Familiar silence. Yet today, a few more people walk together. Not in large groups. not in loud conversation, but close enough to share the journey. There is a kind of comfort in this. A quiet support. The distance to the river is not always the same for everyone. Some homes sit closer. Some are farther away. For those who live on the outer edges of the village, the walk is longer. The jar feels heavier before the journey is even halfway done. The sun rises higher. The heat settles deeper into the... And still, the steps continue. To ease this, sometimes the work is shared. Two people may walk together, carrying a single larger container between them. A wooden pole rests across their shoulders. The container hangs between them. With each step, it sways slightly. Forward. Back. Forward. Back. The movement requires balance. Coordination. A shared rhythm. If one walks too quickly, the other must adjust. If one slows, the other follows. There is no need to speak about it. The body understands. Together, they move as one steady motion. The weight is divided. Not gone. But softer. More manageable. This way of carrying is not always used. Only when needed. Only when the distance or the amount of water calls for it. Nearby, a man leads a small animal along the path. A donkey. Its are calm, unhurried. Its presence is steady. Across its back, two containers are secured. Balanced on either side. The animal moves without resistance. It knows the path. It has walked it many times. The load it carries is heavier than what a person would take alone. But even here, there is care. The containers are tied securely. Not too tight. Not too loose. The balance must be right. If one side becomes heavier, the movement changes. The shift. The load pulls unevenly. And so, attention is always present. Even in this quiet routine. The donkey reaches the river. It pauses. The man begins to fill the containers. One side. Then the other. Making sure the weight remains equal. The process is slow. Deliberate. Nothing is rushed. When the containers are full, the journey back begins. The animal walks steadily. The man beside it? Their pace is calm. Just like everyone else. These methods help when the need is greater. When more water must be brought at once. When the distance feels longer. When the day feels heavier. Back in the village, the water gathered in this way is shared. Not as something formal. Not as a system that must be followed. But as a quiet understanding. If more has been carried, more can be given. A container may be placed near another home. A small amount poured into another jar. No words are needed. No thanks are required. It is simply part of the rhythm. The village moves together. Even when each person walks alone. In the growing heat of the day, movement becomes slower. The sun stands higher. The air feels still. Even the seems to hold the warmth more strongly. On days like this, the effort of carrying water is felt more deeply. The jar presses down. The arms feel the weight. The steps become more careful. But still, the rhythm does not break. There is no sudden stopping. No abandoning of the task. Only adjustment. Only patience. Some may rest along the way. A brief pause beneath the shade of a simple structure. A moment to shift the weight. To breathe slowly. Then, when ready, the journey continues. The village remains quiet during the hottest part of the day. Movement is reduced. Tasks are slowed. The jars inside the homes are used carefully. A little water at a time. Never more than needed. Because the effort to replace it is always present in the mind. Even if it is not spoken. In the afternoon, the paths begin to fill again. Another trip. Another quiet return to the river. The light softens. The air shifts slightly. The continue. Step by step. Always the same. Always steady. Children watch these longer journeys with quiet attention. They see the shared carrying. The use of animals. The careful balancing of weight. They do not learn all at once. They begin small. A short walk. A light container. A simple task. But over time, they understand more. They take on more. Until one day, the longer path is no longer difficult. It is simply part of the day. Just like everything else. As evening approaches, the village settles again. The water has been carried. Shared. Stored. The jars sit quietly in their places. Holding what was gathered through many small efforts. Through many steady steps. Through the calm cooperation of people moving together, even in silence. Beyond the village, the Nile continues. Its surface reflects the fading light. Its movement remains unchanged. Patient. Endless. And as the day slowly comes to its quiet close, the same gentle truth remains. No matter the distance. No matter the heat. No matter the effort. The water will be carried. Together. Again. The evening settles fully now. The last traces of light fade from the sky, and a soft darkness spreads across the land. It is not heavy or sudden. It moves gently, like a slow breath that covers the village in calm. The air begins to cool. Not as cool as the early morning, but enough to be felt. The warmth of the day loosens its hold. The releases the heat it carried for so many hours. Inside the homes, the jars remain. Still. Unmoving. The water inside them reflects no light now. It rests in darkness, quiet and undisturbed. The sounds of the village grow softer. Footsteps become rare. Voices lower until they are almost whispers, and then even those begin to fade. A small fire may still burn in one corner. Its light flickers gently against the walls, creating slow, moving shadows. The sound of it is soft, a faint crackle, steady and calm. Nearby, someone reaches for water. The movement is slow. A hand touches the jar, feeling its surface in the dim light. The shape is known so well that sight is not needed. The fingers follow the curve, finding the opening without hesitation. A cup is dipped. Lifted. The water moves quietly. There is no splash. Only a soft shift. The cup is raised. A small drink is taken. Not much. Just enough. The day is ending, and the body no longer asks for more. The cup is returned. The jar remains. Holding what is left. Holding what will be needed again when the light returns. Outside, the sky deepens. Stars appear. First a few. Then more. They rest above the village in a wide, silent spread, unmoving to the eye, yet slowly shifting through the long hours of the night. The Nile reflects a faint shimmer from above. Its surface cannot be fully seen now, but its presence is always felt. The quiet sound of water moving along the shore continues. Soft. Endless. A rhythm that does not stop. Somewhere, an animal shifts. A gentle movement in the darkness. Then stillness again. The village rests. Not completely silent, but close to it. Each home holds its own quiet. Each person settles into rest in their own way. And through all of this, the water remains close. Even in sleep, it is part of life. Its presence is known. Its importance never fades. A child lies quietly, eyes slowly closing. The day has been long in its own gentle way. There were small tasks, small walks, small moments of learning. The sight of others carrying jars. The feeling of holding a cup. The understanding, growing little by little, that water is something to be cared for. This knowledge does not feel heavy. It does not feel like a burden. It feels natural. Like breathing. Like walking. Like the passing of time itself. In another home, an older figure rests. The body is still. The breath is slow. The hands that have carried water for so many years now rest quietly at the side. The movements of the day are complete. But the memory remains. The feeling of the jar. The balance. The steady steps along the path. These things do not disappear. They become part of the person. Part of the body. Part of the quiet rhythm that continues, even in rest. The night moves forward. Slowly. Patiently. The stars shift across the sky. The air cools a little more. And the village remains calm. Very calm. The jars stand in their places. Unchanged. Their surfaces hold the warmth they absorbed during the day, now slowly releasing it into the cooler air. Inside, the water waits. Always waiting. Not in a restless way. But in a steady, quiet presence. As if it understands that it will be needed again. As if it knows the rhythm as well as the people do. Time passes. There is no need to measure it. No need to count. The night is long, but it does not feel heavy. It flows, just like the river. Without interruption. Without urgency. And then, slowly, very slowly, the first light begins to return again. Not bright. Not strong. Just a soft change in the sky. The stars begin to fade. The shifts. The earth prepares for another day. Inside the homes, the jars remain. Some still hold enough water. Some are lighter now. But all of them carry the same quiet message. The day will begin again. The path will be walked again. The water will be carried again. Not as something new. Not as something different. But as something familiar. Something steady. Something that has always been. And as the first footsteps begin once more, soft against the rhythm continues. Unbroken. Calm. Endless. Like the river itself. The first light returns again, as it always does. It does not hurry. It does not arrive with sound. It simply appears, softly, stretching across the sky in pale shades that slowly grow brighter. The village wakes within this gentle light. Not all at once. Not with sudden movement. But slowly, quietly, as if each person is part of the same calm rhythm. Inside the homes, the jars remain where they were placed the night before. Still. Steady. Holding what remains of yesterday's effort. A woman opens her eyes. For a moment, she does not move. She listens. The same distant sound reaches her, the Nile, flowing as it always has, never stopping, never changing its steady motion. She sits up. Her movements are simple. There is no hesitation. No uncertainty. Her body remembers what the day will require. It always does. She reaches toward the jar. Her hand touches the clay surface. The feeling is familiar. The shape is known. There is no need to look closely. She knows its weight before lifting the lid. Knows how much water remains. Knows what must be done. This knowledge is quiet. It does not come from thinking. It comes from repetition. From years of the same small actions, carried out day after day until they become part of the body itself. She lifts a cup. Dips it into the water. Drinks slowly. The coolness is softer now than it was during the night, but still present enough to be felt. Enough to begin the day. Outside, the first footsteps begin again. The same soft pattern. The same steady movement. The path toward the river fills slowly with life. A young girl walks beside an older woman. They are not exactly the same. The older one moves with a smooth, steady rhythm. The younger one is more careful, more aware of each step. She watches closely. Not in an obvious way, but quietly. Her eyes follow the way the jar is held. The way the body stays balanced. The way the steps remain even, no matter the weight. This is how learning happens. Not through long explanation. Not through spoken instruction. But through presence. Through watching. Through doing. Again and again. The path itself holds memory. Though it does not speak, it carries the marks of countless journeys. Footsteps pressed into the over time. Subtle changes in the surface where people walk most often. These marks are not noticed directly. But they are there. A quiet record of movement. Of repetition. Of life continuing in the same steady way. At the river, the same motions return. The jars are lowered. The water fills them. The weight grows. Always the same. Always familiar. The young girl tries to lift her smaller container. It is not heavy compared to the others. But it is enough for her. She adjusts her grip. Carefully. The older woman watches, but does not interfere. There is no need. The learning must come through the body. Through the feeling of weight. Through the understanding of balance. The girl lifts the container. Holds it close. Takes a step. Then another. Her are slow. Deliberate. She feels the movement of the water inside. How it shifts slightly with each step. How it asks for steadiness. This is the beginning. The first part of something that will continue for the rest of her life. Not as a burden, but as a quiet part of living. They begin the walk back. The sun rises slowly. The light spreads across the village comes into view again. And the cycle continues. Inside the homes, the jars are filled once more. Placed in their familiar positions. Used in the same careful ways. Nothing changes quickly here. And yet, everything moves forward. Because the people change. The younger become older. The learners become the ones who are watched. The small hands that once held light containers now carry full jars. The careful steps become steady. The awareness becomes natural. This is how the rhythm continues across generations. Not through written history. Not through spoken records. But through action. Through repetition. Through the quiet passing of knowledge from one person to another. Without pressure. Without force. Just through living. The water itself becomes part of this memory. It is not only something that is carried. It is something that shapes understanding. Each journey to the river leaves a mark. Not on the ground alone, but in the body, in the mind, in the quiet awareness that grows over time. The feel of the jar, the balance of the weight, the sound of water being poured. These small details become familiar in a way that does not fade. Even as years pass, even as the body grows older, the memory remains. In the muscles, in the calm way the jar is lifted and placed without thought. In the afternoon, the same patterns return. Another walk, another filling, another steady journey. But now, the young girl walks a little more confidently. Her steps are still careful, but less uncertain. She has felt the weight. She has understood the movement. And now, it begins to feel more natural. This is how change happens here. Slowly, gently, without notice, day by day, step by step. As the evening approaches, the village settles again. The jars are filled. The water is stored. The day begins to fade. But the rhythm does not end. It simply rests, waiting for the next morning, for the next set of footsteps, for the same quiet journey to begin again. And somewhere, within all of this, there is a calm that does not need to be spoken. A steady feeling that everything is as it should be. That the river will continue. That the path will remain. That the jars will be lifted again. That the water will be carried. Just as it always has been. Just as it always will be. The evening light settles again over the village. It moves slowly, as it always does, stretching across in soft layers of gold and fading orange. The shadows grow longer, but not harsh. Not sharp. Everything feels softened, as if the day itself is lowering its voice. Inside the homes, the jars of water stand quietly. But not all jars are the same. Not all homes are the same. And not all lives move in exactly the same rhythm, even though they share the same river, the same path, and the same sky. Some jars are larger, thicker at the base, built for holding more water at once. These belong to homes where more hands drink from the same source. Larger families, more activity, more need throughout the day. Other jars are smaller, easier to lift, easier to carry. They sit in quieter homes, where fewer people live, or where strength is more limited, or where distance makes heavy carrying more difficult. Each jar is shaped with a purpose. Each one belongs to a way of life. In one home, the jar is placed carefully in a shaded corner. The shade matters. Even a small difference in light can change the temperature of the water inside. A little more sun, and the water warms faster. A little more shadow, and it stays cooler longer. These small details are noticed over time. Not taught, but learned. A man enters his home after returning from the river. His steps are slow now. Not from exhaustion alone, but from the natural slowing that comes after the day's effort is complete. He sets the jar down. Carefully. The sound is soft against the earth floor. No one speaks. There is no need. The act itself is understood. Water has arrived. And that is enough. In another home, someone checks a crack in a smaller container. It is thin. Barely visible. But it must be watched. A small line in the clay can grow over time. Especially with repeated use. Especially with heat and dryness. A simple paste is prepared. Pressed gently into the line. Smoothed with fingers. Left to dry. This is how a repair happens. Quietly. without replacement, without waste. Because every object carries effort within it. And effort is not easily discarded. Outside, the village continues its slow evening rhythm. A few people still move between homes, sharing small amounts of water where needed. Not formally, not as a task, but as part of living together. A container may be refilled from another. A cup passed from one hand to another. No words are exchanged in these moments. Only movement. Only understanding. There is a quiet balance in this system. Those who carry more water in the morning often have less need later. Those who live closer to the river may share more easily. Those who are farther away may receive when needed. It is not written. It is not planned. It simply exists through awareness. Through repeated experience. As night approaches, the differences between homes become less visible. The jars are all placed in similar positions. The sounds grow softer everywhere. The same sky stretches above all of them. The same river flows nearby. In this way, the village becomes one quiet whole again. Not separated by size or distance or effort, but connected through the same rhythm. The same dependence. The same daily return to water. Inside one home, a child sits near a jar. Watching. Not touching. Just observing. The way the surface reflects faint light from a small flame. The way the water remains still even when the room shifts around it. The child does not fully understand all of it yet. But something is forming. A quiet awareness. That water is not simply something present. It is something that must be brought. Protected. Shared. Respected. Outside, the night deepens. The stars return. One by one. Slowly filling the sky with quiet light. The Nile continues its movement beyond the village. Unseen now. But still present. Still flowing. Still carrying the same rhythm that has shaped every day before this one. And within the homes, the jars remain still. Holding what was carried. Holding what was shared. Holding the quiet effort of many footsteps. Of many journeys. Of many lives moving together without noise. The night becomes deeper. Calmer. And the village rests again. Not in emptiness. But in completion. For now, the water is here. And that is enough. The morning arrives again, but it does not feel the same as before. The light is still soft at first, spreading gently across the horizon, touching the Nile, touching the village, touching the with familiar calm. But the air is different. It is warmer from the beginning. Even before the sun rises fully, there is a sense that the day will be heavier than usual. Inside the homes, people notice it quietly. Not through words. Not through worry. But through small signs. A jar that feels slightly warmer than expected. A night that did not cool as much as before. A breath that carries a little more warmth than comfort. The river is still there. Always there. But the journey to it feels longer in days like this. A woman steps outside earlier than usual. Her movements are slow, but intentional. She lifts the jar and pauses for a moment. The weight is familiar. But the air around her feels different as it touches her skin. She begins to walk. The path is the same. The village is the same. But the heat changes how everything feels. Even silence feels warmer. Even stillness feels more present. Others are already moving. A few walk closer together today, not for conversation, but for the quiet comfort of shared presence. When the air feels heavier, being alone feels different. So people naturally stay within sight of one another. Not planned. Just understood. At the river, the Nile still flows with its calm strength. It does not change its rhythm. It does not rush or slow. It simply continues. But the edge of the water feels more important on days like this. More necessary. More needed. Containers are filled more carefully. People watch the level more closely. Not because there is less water in the river, but because the feeling of need inside the village has increased. The heat changes how water is experienced. A single cup feels more meaningful. A single sip feels more noticeable in the body. The return journey begins. The jars feel heavier today. Not in actual weight, but in how the body perceives them. The warmth of the air presses against movement. Steps become more deliberate, more measured. There is no rush. There cannot be. Because rushing only makes the heat feel stronger. Inside the village, shade becomes more important. Walls that were once simple now offer relief. Trees, even small ones, become gathering places. People pause beneath them. Not stopping the work, but pacing it. A short rest. A slow breath. Then movement again. The water inside the jars changes slowly too. It does not disappear quickly. But it feels different in warmth like this. It becomes something that must be managed more carefully. Drunk in smaller amounts. Shared more thoughtfully. Even the act of pouring becomes slower. More intentional. A child sits in the shade, watching a cup being filled. The movement is slower than usual. Each drop feels like it takes its time. The child notices this without needing to understand it fully. It becomes part of memory. Part of learning. Part of growing up in a place where water and heat are always connected. In some homes, extra attention is given to the jars today. They are moved deeper into shade. Wrapped more carefully. Placed where air can still move around them. Small adjustments. Quiet decisions. Made without discussion. Because everyone understands the reason. When the heat rises, water must be protected even more. Not because it is fragile, but because it becomes more important. As the day reaches its strongest point, movement slows across the village. Not everything stops, but everything softens. The rhythm becomes gentler. The steps become fewer. The voices lower even more. The Nile continues to flow in the distance, unchanged by the heat above it. Its presence remains the same steady truth beneath everything. Later, when the sun begins to lower again, relief slowly returns. Not suddenly, but gradually. The air begins to loosen. The releases some of its stored warmth. And the weight of the jars feels lighter again, even though nothing inside them has changed. People begin to move once more toward the river. This time, not with urgency, but with calm acceptance. Because the cycle continues regardless of heat or ease. Water will always be needed. And the path will always be walked. The evening returns gently. The village breathes again. The jars are filled. The bodies rest. And the day, no matter how heavy it became, settles into memory. Tomorrow may be cooler. Or hotter. Or exactly the same. But the rhythm will remain. The river will remain. And the quiet journey for water will begin again. The night returns again, quietly, as if it never truly left. It moves over the village without force, without noise, without interruption. The last traces of the day fade into soft darkness, and the sky opens into its familiar field of stars. The Nile continues beyond the edges of sight. Not as something distant, but as something always present. Even when unseen. Even when unheard. Inside the homes, the jars stand in their places. Still holding water. Still holding the memory of the day. Some are fuller than others. Some have been used more. Some less. But all of them remain part of the same simple truth. Water is not separate from life here. It is life moving through daily moments. A man sits quietly near the doorway of his home. The heat of the day has finally left his body. His breathing is slower now. More even. He does not speak. There is no need for words at this time. The night already understands everything that must be understood. He looks toward the jar. Not with urgency, but with familiarity. It has been carried. It has been placed. It has been used. And now it rests again. Just as he rests. Just as the village rests. A small sound comes from outside. Perhaps a shift in wind. Perhaps an animal moving somewhere in the darkness. But it does not disturb the calm. It simply passes through it. Like everything else. The river, far away, continues its endless movement. It does not belong to any single person. It does not belong to any single home. Yet it is part of every home. Every morning journey leads back to it. Every evening return carries its presence into the village. Over time, the river becomes more than water. It becomes a direction. A rhythm. A quiet understanding of how life continues. There is no need to think about it deeply. It is simply known. A child lies down to sleep. The day is still present in the mind, but it is soft now. Not sharp. The memory of holding a small container. The feeling of watching water fill slowly. The quiet steps along the path. These moments do not feel separate. They blend together into something calm. Something steady. Something that does not disturb rest. Outside, the village is almost completely still. The jars remain untouched. The water inside them rests without movement. But even still, it feels alive in a quiet way. Because it will be used again. Because it is part of tomorrow. Because nothing here is ever truly finished. Only paused. The night stretches on gently. Time does not feel heavy here. It does not feel urgent. It simply continues. Like the river. Like the steps to the river. Like the hands that carry what is needed and return again. Far beyond the village, the Nile flows through darkness. It passes land that is quiet. Land that is sleeping. Land that depends on it without always seeing it. The river does not change its course for any single night. It does not change its pace. It does not stop. It only moves forward, as it always has. And in that movement, everything nearby finds its own rhythm. The village, too, follows that rhythm. Not consciously, but naturally. Morning will come again. Light will return. The path will be walked. The jars will be lifted. The water will be carried. Not because it is asked. Not because it is forced. But because it is part of living here. Part of breathing. Part of existing beside a river that never stops. And in this quiet understanding, there is no struggle. Only continuity. Only calm repetition. Only the steady presence of something that has always been and will always be. The night deepens once more. The stars remain still. The village rests fully now. and the river continues its soft journey through the darkness, carrying the same quiet promise into another morning that has not yet arrived. The night is at its deepest now. The sky is no longer changing. It simply rests in a wide, quiet darkness, holding the stars like small steady points of light that do not move, even though time passes beneath them. The village is fully still. Not empty. Not lifeless. Just still, in the way that comes after a long day has been fully lived. Inside the homes, the jars of water remain where they were placed. They do not speak. They do not move. But they are present in every room, in every corner where life will begin again when morning returns. The water inside them is calm. It has settled completely now. No ripples. No motion. Only quiet rest. A soft reminder that something essential is always near, even in silence. A small wind passes over the village. It is gentle. Almost careful. It moves across the rooftops, along the walls, through the narrow spaces between homes, and then fades again into stillness. Nothing is disturbed. Everything remains as it is. A child sleeps deeply now. The day has disappeared from awareness. Only fragments remain. The feeling of walking. The weight of a small container. The world is almost entirely still now. Not in a way that feels empty, but in a way that feels complete. As if everything has found its place for the moment, and no movement is needed to make it whole. The Nile continues its unseen journey through the darkness. It does not announce itself. It does not change its rhythm. It simply moves forward, carrying the same quiet presence it always has. Along its banks, the village rests more deeply now. The homes are silent. The paths are empty. Even the smallest sounds have softened into the background of night. Inside one home, a jar of water sits near a wall. The clay holds a faint memory of warmth from earlier in the day. Now, it slowly returns that warmth to the air around it, little by little, without sound. The water inside is still. Perfectly still. Not because it has stopped being important, but because it is waiting in its own way. Waiting for the next hand. The next cup. The next quiet morning when life will reach for it again without hesitation. A person sleeps nearby. Their breathing is slow. Even. Unbroken. The body rests, but somewhere deeper than thought, there is still connection. Not memory in the sharp sense, but something softer. A feeling of movement. Of carrying. Of water filling space. Of walking a familiar path beside others who also know it well. These impressions do not form stories in sleep. They simply exist. Like a gentle current beneath everything else. Outside, the night is at its deepest point. No horizon is visible now. Only a wide, quiet darkness that stretches across land and river alike. Yet even in this darkness, nothing feels lost. The Nile is still there. The village is still there. The rhythm is still there. It does not depend on light to continue. It does not depend on awareness to remain. It simply is. And in that simple existence, everything else finds balance. The jars do not move. But they are not separate from the river. They are extensions of it, in a quiet human way. Water leaves the river. Travels through hands. Through clay. Through time. And returns again, day after day, without resistance. This cycle does not feel repetitive here. It feels natural. Like breath. Like heartbeat. Like something too simple to question, yet too essential to ignore. The night begins to soften at its edges. not noticeably at first. But gradually, the darkness loses its deepest weight. A faint shift appears far away in the sky, where the first hint of returning light will eventually form. But it is still far from morning. There is no urgency in it. Only continuation. The river remains unchanged by this shift. It has seen countless nights like this. Countless mornings that followed. Countless footsteps returning to its edge. And it continues, without memory of effort, because it has never needed to hold memory in that way. It only moves. And in its movement, everything else finds rhythm. Inside the village, sleep deepens again. Not because the night demands it, but because the body understands it. Understands the cycle. Understands the pause between one day and the next. The jars remain still. The homes remain quiet. The paths remain empty. And yet nothing feels paused in a final way. Everything feels temporarily at rest. Like water that has stopped moving for a moment in a calm pool, but still knows it will flow again when the time comes. The thought of morning is not present here. It does not need to be. It exists already, woven into the structure of everything that came before. And so, there is no waiting in tension. Only resting in familiarity. Only existing within a rhythm that has no true beginning and no true end. Just continuation. Soft. Steady. Unspoken. And as the night holds its final deep breath, even silence feels complete. Not empty. Just full in its own quiet way. Full of everything that has already happened. And everything that will gently happen again. There is a moment in the night that feels almost like suspension. Not silence in the sense of absence. But silence as fullness, as if the world is holding everything it has lived through, and resting inside it for a while. The Nile moves through that moment without change. It does not pause for it. It does not mark it. It simply continues its slow passage through land and time, carrying the same quiet certainty it has always carried. The village remains asleep. Not deeply in a way that suggests heaviness. But gently, as if held by something steady and familiar. Inside the homes, the jars of water wait in stillness. Their presence is simple. But not small. They stand as quiet points of connection between river and life, between movement and rest, between effort and return. The water inside them does not shift. Not even slightly. It rests in a way that feels complete. As if it has also accepted the pause of the night. A small sound passes through the village. A soft movement. Perhaps a shifting of air. Perhaps a distant animal stepping carefully across the earth. It does not disturb anything. It passes through the night and fades again. Like everything else. A person turns gently in sleep. Their body does not wake. But something within them responds to the rhythm outside the walls. The rhythm of water. Of flow. Of distance walked and returned. This is not thought. Not memory in a clear form. But something quieter than that. A feeling that belongs to living here. Where water is not only seen, but carried. Not only used, but remembered in the body. Outside, the darkness begins to soften in ways too subtle to notice at first. The edge of the sky changes slightly. Not into light yet. But into something less absolute. Less deep. A transition that does not announce itself. The Nile continues beneath that same sky. Unchanged. Unbothered. Unbroken. It has no need to respond to the coming morning. It is already part of it, even before it arrives. The village remains in rest. But not in separation. Everything is still connected. Even in sleep. Especially in sleep. Because the rhythm does not stop when eyes close. It continues quietly beneath awareness. The path to the river still exists. Even though no feet are on it. The jars still hold water. Even though no hands are touching them. The carrying still exists as memory within the space of the village itself. As if the entire place remembers its own movement. And holds it gently while resting. There is a calmness here that does not feel fragile. It feels steady. Like something that has been repeated so many times that it no longer needs effort to continue. Morning is not yet present. But it is not absent either. It is approaching in the same way it always does. Slowly. Without urgency. Without interruption. The night does not resist it. It simply allows it to come. And in that allowing, everything remains in balance. The river continues. The village rests. The jars wait. And somewhere within this quiet continuity, there is a sense that nothing has been left behind. Nothing has been interrupted. Nothing has ended in a final way. Only paused. Only held gently within the larger movement of time. The air grows slightly lighter at the edge of perception. A subtle shift that suggests change without revealing it fully. The stars remain, but feel softer now. Less sharp against the sky. More distant. The earth beneath the village holds its warmth quietly, slowly releasing it into the cooling air. Everything is in transition. But nothing is disturbed. And so the night continues in its final calm form. Not as darkness alone. But as the soft space where everything prepares to continue again. Before anything is clearly seen, it is felt. A faint change in the air. A softness that was not there a moment ago. The night has not ended, but it has begun to loosen its hold. The darkness is still present over the village, still covering the homes, the paths, and the quiet spaces between them. But it is no longer as deep as before. The Nile continues its movement without change. It does not mark this moment. It does not shift for it. It simply flows, as it always does, through the boundary between night and the beginning of morning. Inside the homes, nothing moves yet. But everything is close to movement. The jars of water remain in their places. Still cool. Still steady. Still waiting. A person sleeps lightly now. Not deeply. Not fully awake. But somewhere between rest and awareness, the body begins to sense change. Not through thought. But through rhythm. The rhythm of life that has repeated so many times it no longer needs instruction. Morning is near. Not suddenly. Not loudly. Just near enough to be felt. A small breath is taken. Slow. Even. And in that breath, there is no resistance to what is coming. Only quiet readiness. Outside, the sky begins to shift again. Very slowly. The darkness thins at the edges. Not breaking. Not disappearing. Just becoming less absolute. A soft gradient forms where night begins to give way, little by little, to something lighter. The stars remain visible, but they feel more distant now. Less anchored. As if they are slowly stepping back from the world below. The earth itself feels different in this moment. Not warmer yet. But less enclosed. Less held by the night. The village remains still. But it is no longer in its deepest state of rest. There is a subtle transition happening through everything. Through air. Through silence. Through presence. The Nile continues to reflect nothing clearly now. Only a faint sense of change above it. It moves with the same patience it has always carried. It does not arrive at morning. It simply exists through it. A child stirs slightly in sleep. Not waking. Just shifting. The body responds to something it cannot name. A familiarity that lives beneath thought. The awareness of cycles. Of repetition. Of movement that returns without being forced. In another home, a jar stands near a wall. The clay is still cool to the touch. The water inside remains undisturbed. But soon, it will be lifted again. Not yet. But soon. The first hint of light grows a little stronger. Still soft. Still quiet. But no longer hidden. It begins to touch the edges of the village, as if gently testing the boundary between night and day. Nothing reacts sharply. Everything adjusts slowly. The same way it always has. The river remains unchanged. It does not wait. It does not begin. It continues. And in its continuation, the village finds its own timing. Footsteps will return soon. Hands will reach for jars again. Paths will be walked again. But for now, everything remains in this delicate space between stillness and movement. Between rest and return. Between night and the first breath of morning. And in that space, there is a quiet peace that does not need explanation. Only presence. Only continuation. Only the gentle understanding that nothing is ending, and nothing is starting suddenly. Everything is simply moving forward. Softly. Naturally. Like water finding its way back to the river, again and again, without ever forgetting where it belongs. Morning does not arrive with sound. It does not declare itself. It simply becomes present. Slowly. Quietly. As if it has always been there, only waiting for the night to soften enough to notice it. The sky above the village is no longer dark. But it is not yet bright. It is something in between. A pale, gentle tone spreading outward without urgency. The Nile reflects this change in the smallest way. Not as a clear image, but as a soft suggestion of light returning to the world. Inside the homes, the jars of water are still in place. But they no longer feel like objects belonging only to the night. They now feel like part of the coming day. A woman opens her eyes. There is no sudden movement. No sharp transition. Just awareness returning slowly, like breath finding its rhythm again after rest. She remains still for a moment. Listening. Not for noise. But for presence. The village is not yet active. But it is no longer asleep in the same way. There is a quiet readiness in the air. She sits up. The motion is familiar. Repeated so many times that it no longer requires thought. Her hand moves toward the jar. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just naturally. The clay feels the same as always. Cool. Steady. Grounded. She lifts a cup. Dips it into the water. And drinks. The act is simple. But it carries everything from the days before it. Every walk. Every return. Every quiet journey to the river that made this moment possible. Outside, the first footsteps begin again. Not all at once. Not in a rush. But one by one. A soft reappearance of movement across the village. A door opens. Then another. Then another. The paths begin to hold life again. Not loudly. But steadily. The Nile continues its flow in the distance. It does not change for this moment. It does not acknowledge it as new. It simply continues. as it always has. People step onto the paths with familiar rhythm. The ground beneath them is the same. The air is cooler than the day that will come later. The jars are lifted again. The weight is remembered, not as surprise, but as familiarity. A boy walks beside an older figure. Their steps are not perfectly matched, but they move in the same direction. Toward the river. Always toward the river. The morning light grows a little stronger. Enough now to shape shadows more clearly. Enough to show the outlines of movement across the village. But still soft. Still gentle. The river appears again at the edge of sight. Quiet. Constant. Unchanged. Its surface carries the sky in broken reflections, shifting with each small movement of water. The jars are lowered. Filled. Lifted again. The same cycle. The same motion. The same understanding that does not need to be spoken. The weight returns. But it is not unfamiliar. It is expected. It belongs here. The walk back begins once more. Step by step. Unhurried. Balanced. The village waits ahead. Not as a destination that ends the journey, but as part of it. Because nothing here is separate from the river. Nothing here is separate from the act of carrying. Everything is part of one continuous rhythm that moves through time without breaking. As the morning fully settles, the village becomes active again. Not abruptly, but in layers. In softness. In repetition that feels like memory becoming action once more. The jars are placed. The water is used. The day begins. And beneath it all, unchanged and steady, the Nile continues to flow. Not as background, but as foundation. Not as distance, but as presence. And in that presence, life moves forward again. Quietly. Naturally. Endlessly. The morning has fully settled now. The light is no longer uncertain. It has spread across the village in a steady, familiar way, touching the roofs, the paths, and the quiet corners where shadows once rested through the night. The Nile reflects this daylight without effort. It does not change its nature with the sun. It simply continues to move, as it always has, holding within it the quiet memory of countless mornings just like this one. Inside the homes, life is already in motion again. Not in a hurried way, but in a way that feels natural, as if nothing ever truly stopped. A jar is lifted. Water is poured. A small meal is prepared. A face is washed. Each action is simple on its own. But together, they form the shape of the day. A shape that has been repeated for so long that it no longer needs to be questioned. A man steps outside. The air feels different now that the sun is higher. Warmer. Lighter. The path beneath his feet is familiar, even without looking down. He adjusts the cloth on his shoulder and begins to walk. Not alone. Others are already moving too. Some ahead. Some behind. Some beside him for a few quiet steps before their paths gently separate again. There is no need to coordinate this movement. It simply happens. Like a shared understanding that exists without words. The river is visible again at the edge of the land. Always the same. Always slightly different. The surface shifts with the breeze, reflecting light in patterns that never repeat exactly the same way twice. The jars are filled once more. The weight returns to the body. But it is no longer something new. It is something known. Something carried so many times that it becomes part of how movement itself is understood. A child watches closely as someone balances a jar. not with surprise, but with attention. The posture, the steps, the way the body adjusts without thinking. These details are stored quietly in observation. Not spoken, not taught directly, but absorbed slowly through presence. The return journey begins again. The same path, the same rhythm, the same steady movement between river and village. And yet, no two journeys feel exactly identical. The wind may be slightly different. The light may fall at a different angle. The body may feel slightly lighter or heavier depending on rest, on heat, on time. But the rhythm remains unchanged beneath all of it. That is what holds everything together. Not perfection, not speed, but continuity. Inside the village, the jars are placed back in their familiar spaces. Shadows move gently across their surfaces as the day continues to rise. The water inside remains still, patient, present, waiting for the next hand, the next moment of use, the next small need that will bring it forward again. As the day deepens, the village becomes fully active. Not chaotic, not loud, but steady. A living pattern of movement shaped by water, shaped by land, shaped by the long relationship between people and the river beside them. And beneath all of it, the Nile continues. Unchanged in its purpose, uninterrupted in its flow. It does not ask to be noticed. It does not ask to be remembered. It simply carries everything forward in its own quiet way. And in that quietness, everything else finds balance. The carrying, the walking, the drinking, the resting, all of it held together by something larger than any single moment. Something that does not end with the night, and does not begin with the morning. Something that simply continues, softly, endlessly, like water moving through time without ever forgetting its path. The day continues in its quiet, steady way. Nothing in the village announces itself as important. There are no sudden changes, no sharp interruptions. Everything moves as if it has already agreed on how it should exist. Light spreads across the land in a warm, even layer. The sun does not feel harsh yet. It is simply present, hanging above the Nile, above the paths, above the homes that stand close to the earth. Inside those homes, water remains at the center of everything. Not as something rare, not as something distant, but as something ordinary, yet essential in every moment. A cup is filled. A pot is placed over a small flame. Hands are washed slowly, as dust from the morning walk settles into the water and disappears. Each action feels simple on its own. But together, they form the structure of the day itself. A structure that repeats without needing instruction. Outside, the paths are active again. People move with familiar ease. Some carry empty jars toward the river. Others return with full ones. Some pause briefly in the shade before continuing. There is no strict separation between work and rest here. They exist side by side, blending gently into one another. A man walks at a steady pace, the weight of water balanced carefully. His body has learned this movement so well that it no longer feels like effort in the way it once might have. It has become part of how he moves through the world. Not separate from life, but part of it. The river appears again ahead, calm and unchanged. Its presence is constant enough that it feels less like a place and more like a direction that everything naturally returns to. The jars are filled once more. The water shifts inside them, then settles. The sound is soft, almost unnoticeable. But it marks a transition. From emptiness to fullness. From need to fulfillment. From distance to return. The walk back begins again. Step by step. Not rushed. Not delayed. Just steady. The village waits, not in expectation, but in continuity. Because there is always something moving between it and the river. Something that never truly stops. When the jars are placed back inside the homes, the movement of the day does not end. It only changes shape. Water is poured into smaller vessels. Used in small, careful amounts. A meal continues to cook. A surface is cleaned. A moment of rest follows. Then movement begins again. This cycle does not feel repetitive to those living within it. It feels natural. Like breathing. Like the slow turning of time itself. As the afternoon approaches, the air becomes warmer again. The shadows shift slightly across the ground. The light changes its angle. And the village adjusts without needing to think about it. Some movement slows. Some continues. Some pauses briefly before resuming. Everything adapts quietly. Nothing breaks. Nothing stops. The Nile remains unchanged throughout all of this. It does not reflect urgency. It does not reflect fatigue. It simply flows, carrying the land's entire rhythm within its path. And in that flow, the village finds its own balance again and again. Evening will come later. And with it, another return. Another filling. Another quiet journey along the same familiar path. Not because it is demanded, but because it is part of how life continues here. Not as something extraordinary, but as something gently ordinary. Something that does not need to be remembered loudly. Because it is already held in every step. Every jar. Every drop of water that moves from river to home and back again in endless, quiet continuity. And as the day moves forward without resistance, there is only this soft understanding, nothing is ever truly separate from the river. Not the walking. Not the waiting. Not the resting. Everything moves with it. Everything returns to it. Everything continues through it. The afternoon light begins to soften again. It does not change suddenly. It simply loses a little of its sharpness, as if the day itself is exhaling slowly after hours of warmth. The village remains in motion, but the movement has a quieter tone now. Less bright. Less direct. More patient. The Nile continues its steady flow beside everything, unchanged by the passing hours. It does not grow tired. It does not grow lighter or heavier. It simply continues, carrying the same presence through every moment of the day. Along the paths, people move again with familiar purpose. Some are returning from the river. Some are preparing to go. Some are simply walking between one task and another, as the day gently unfolds without urgency. A woman carries a jar balanced carefully. Her steps are slow, not because she is uncertain, but because she understands the importance of balance. The weight is not new. It is remembered. Her body adjusts with each step, shifting slightly when needed, finding stability without thinking. This movement is not separate from her life. It is part of it. A child walks nearby, holding a smaller container. The steps are uneven at times, but learning happens within the movement itself. There is no correction spoken. Only observation. Only repetition. Only time. The river appears again ahead, calm as always. The surface reflects the softening light of the afternoon sky, broken in small ripples that move outward and disappear without sound. Water is drawn again. Not with hesitation. not with surprise, but with the quiet understanding that this is what the day requires. The jars are filled. The weight returns. And the journey back begins once more. The path feels slightly different in the afternoon. Not because it has changed, but because the body experiences it differently depending on the time of day. The heat lingers lightly in the air. The earth holds warmth from earlier hours. The footsteps remain steady, but more measured now. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is delayed. Everything continues in balance. Inside the village, the return of water is met with calm familiarity. A jar is placed near a wall. Another is set in shade. A small amount is poured into a cooking pot. A cup is filled and shared. Each action is simple. Each action is quiet. Yet each one carries the effort of the journey from the river. Nothing arrives without meaning. Nothing is used without awareness. As the afternoon deepens, the village begins to settle into a slower rhythm again. Not stillness, but gentleness. Movement continues, but it softens at the edges. The light shifts gradually across the homes. Shadows grow longer. The air begins to cool slightly in places where the sun no longer reaches directly. And in this changing light, the presence of water becomes even more noticeable. It is everywhere. In jars. In pots. In hands. In small shared moments that pass without words. The Nile remains constant beyond the village, unchanged by the rhythm of human movement along its banks. It flows as it always has, carrying the land's quiet continuity forward without interruption. And the village, in its own way, mirrors that flow. Not in speed, but in repetition. In steady return. In the gentle acceptance that every journey away is also a journey back. As evening approaches once more, the paths will fill again. The jars will be lifted again. The water will be carried again. Not as a task that stands apart from life, but as life itself, continuing through time without resistance. And in that continuation, there is a quiet calm that does not need to be spoken. Only lived. Only repeated. Only carried forward, like water moving endlessly between river and home. Evening arrives in the same gentle way it always does. There is no clear moment when it begins. Only a slow softening of light across the village, as if the world itself is lowering its voice. The sun moves closer to the horizon, and the air begins to change again. Not cold. Not warm. Just softer. More forgiving. The Nile reflects this shift without effort. Its surface holds the fading light in broken pieces, moving constantly, never staying still long enough to become fixed. It does not mark time. It simply carries it. Along the paths, the final movements of the day begin to gather. People return from their last journeys to the river. Some walk alone. Some walk beside others for a few quiet steps before separating again near their homes. There is no need for coordination. The rhythm of return is already shared. A man adjusts the jar on his shoulder as he walks. The weight is familiar now, almost comforting in its predictability. It does not feel like burden. It feels like completion. Something carried, and now brought home. A child follows slightly behind, holding a smaller container with both hands. The steps are careful. Not uncertain, but attentive. The ground is watched more closely now, as if each step carries importance that will soon be understood more fully with time. Inside the village, doors open and close softly. Water is poured into cooking pots. Faces are washed in preparation for rest. Small meals are prepared with quiet focus. Every movement feels slightly slower than the morning, slightly calmer than the afternoon, as if the day itself is beginning to rest. The jars are placed in their usual spots, near walls, in shaded corners, where the remaining warmth of the day will not reach too strongly. The water inside them settles once again. It does not change its nature with the time of day. It simply remains present, ready, waiting. The river remains visible at the edge of the land for a little longer before the light fades further. Its presence feels steady, even as details become harder to see. It is not something that disappears with evening. It is something that continues beyond what the eyes can hold. As the sky deepens, the colors shift slowly. Soft oranges give way to cooler tones. The outlines of the village become quieter, less defined, more blended into the growing calm. Movement slows. Not completely, but enough to feel the difference. Enough to mark the transition into rest. Inside one home, a jar is touched lightly before being left in place. A final adjustment. A small reminder of care. Then stillness returns. Not emptiness. Just stillness. The kind that gathers naturally after a full day has been lived. Outside, the Nile continues its endless flow through the fading light. It does not change its pace. It does not pause for the evening. It simply continues, carrying the same quiet presence through the transition between day and night. And the village, resting beside it, follows in its own way. Not in movement, but in rhythm. Not in effort, but in return. The day has not ended sharply. It has simply softened into evening. And evening, like everything else here, is not an ending. Only a pause. Only a breath. Only another step in the same endless cycle of water, land, and life moving gently forward together. Night does not arrive suddenly here. It folds in slowly, like a cloth being placed gently over the world. First the colors fade from the sky. Then the edges of the village become less certain. Then even the river, once clearly visible, becomes something felt more than seen. The Nile continues its movement through this change without hesitation. It does not become darker or lighter because of the sky above it. It simply remains in motion, carrying the same quiet continuity forward, as it has always done. In the village, the final small movements of the evening settle. A jar is lifted one last time to be placed more securely. A door is closed softly. A fire is allowed to burn lower, its glow shrinking into a smaller, gentler light. Everything slows, not because it is forced, but because the day has naturally reached its resting point. Inside a home, a person sits quietly for a moment before sleep. There is no urgency in their posture. No unfinished thought pressing forward. Only a calm awareness of the day that has passed. Water was carried. Water was used. Water was shared. And now, it rests again in its jars, just as the body rests after movement. The connection between them is simple here. Not spoken. Not analyzed. Just lived. Outside, the air grows cooler in a way that is almost unnoticeable at first. But over time, it becomes clear enough to feel. The warmth of the earth begins to release into the night sky. The village breathes differently now. Not in motion, but in stillness. The Nile reflects almost nothing at this hour. Only faint impressions of light that no longer belong to the sun. Yet even without reflection, it is present. Always present. Its movement does not depend on visibility. It depends only on itself. A child sleeps deeply now, the day fully dissolved into rest. The body no longer holds the effort of walking or carrying. But somewhere within that rest, there is still a quiet sense of rhythm. A soft memory of steps. Of water being filled. Of the feeling of balance returning again and again. These impressions do not form clear dreams. They simply exist, like a background to sleep. The village is almost completely still now. Only the faintest movements remain. A shifting of air. A distant sound that fades before it can be fully noticed. Even these dissolve quickly into silence. And in that silence, there is no emptiness. Only completion. The jars of water stand quietly in their places. Their surfaces no longer reflect the day. They reflect only stillness now. But they are not separate from what has happened. They carry the entire day within them in an unseen way. Every journey to the river. Every return along the path. Every hand that lifted them. Every moment of use. All of it remains, quietly held within their stillness. The Nile continues its slow passage through the darkness beyond the village. It does not change for night. It does not change for rest. It continues because it always has. And because it always will. The village, resting beside it, does the same in its own way. Not through movement now. But through rhythm remembered in stillness. Through cycles that do not end. Only pause. Only soften. Only prepare for what will return again when morning begins to form once more at the edge of the sky. And as the night deepens into its calmest point, everything feels gently held in place. Not frozen. Not stopped. Just resting. Like water in a jar. Waiting without tension. Waiting without end. Only continuing. Quietly. Endlessly. With the river. The night reaches its quietest point now. Not darker than before, but more settled, as if everything has finally found its exact place within it. The village does not feel asleep in pieces anymore. It feels fully held in rest. Each home, each path, each small space between walls and earth is part of the same calm stillness. The Nile continues beyond all of this. It does not belong to the night, and it does not belong to the day. It simply passes through both, unchanged in its quiet movement. No sound marks its progress. No light fully reveals it. But it is there, steady and continuous, like something the world depends on without ever needing to speak its name. Inside one home, a jar of water stands near the wall. The clay is cool now, having released the last warmth it carried from the day. The water inside is still. Perfectly still. It does not shift even when the air outside moves slightly. It rests in its own quiet balance, as if it too understands the rhythm of the world around it. A person breathes slowly in sleep. Their body is at ease now, free from the effort of walking, carrying, and returning. But even in deep rest, something remains connected. A faint sense of motion, like memory without images. The feeling of movement along a familiar path. The weight of a container becoming balanced through practice. The presence of water that is never far away. These impressions do not form clear thoughts. They simply exist beneath everything else. Soft. Unspoken. Present. Outside, the sky is fully dark again, but not heavy. It is wide. Open. And strangely gentle. The stars remain scattered across it, not changing, not reacting, simply existing in their distant calm. The earth beneath the village holds its coolness now, slowly absorbing the warmth of the day and releasing it into the night. Everything is in a state of gentle exchange. Nothing is fixed. Nothing is lost. Even silence feels like part of a larger movement that never truly stops. The Nile continues to flow through the stillness. It does not reflect the village in any clear way now. Only the idea of it. The presence of life along its banks. The repetition of journeys that begin and end with its water. It carries all of that without effort. Without interruption. And in return, the village carries its rhythm in daily life. The exchange is not spoken. It does not need to be. A small shift of air passes through the homes again. Almost unnoticed. A reminder that even in stillness, the world continues to breathe. The village does not respond. It does not need to. It is already aligned with that rhythm. The jars remain where they are. The water inside them remains unchanged. But nothing about them feels separate from the river. They are part of the same flow, even while standing still. Even while resting. Even while waiting. Time moves gently here. Not in sharp lines. But in slow circles. The night does not feel like an end. It feels like a pause that belongs naturally between one return and the next. And somewhere within that pause, there is a quiet understanding that nothing here is ever truly finished. Only continuing in different forms. The river continues. The village continues. The carrying continues. Even sleep continues the rhythm in its own soft way. And so, as the night holds its deepest calm, everything remains connected in silence. Not as separate pieces, but as one long, steady presence moving through time without breaking. Like water that never stops finding its way forward. Quiet. Endless. And always returning. There is a moment deep in the night when everything feels balanced in stillness. Not asleep. Not awake. Just held. The village rests in that space without awareness of it. The homes are quiet. The paths are empty. The jars of water remain where they were placed, unchanged in form, unchanged in purpose. Yet nothing about them feels inactive. They are part of something that continues even when nothing moves. The Nile flows beyond the village in the same unbroken way. It does not feel the passage of night or the approach of morning. It simply continues its path through land and time, carrying the same steady presence it has always carried. Inside a home, a person turns slightly in sleep. The movement is small. Almost nothing. But even this small motion exists within the larger rhythm of rest. Breathing continues in a slow, even pattern. Not directed. Not controlled. Just happening. Like the river. Like the cycle of water between river and jar. Outside, the darkness begins to change again. Not noticeably at first. But in a way that slowly softens its edges. The night is no longer at its deepest point. It has begun, without announcement, to shift towards something new. A faint suggestion of light forms far away, not yet reaching the village, but already part of the sky's quiet transformation. The stars remain visible, but they feel slightly less sharp than before. As if distance itself is gently increasing. The earth beneath the village holds the last traces of warmth from the day. It does not release them quickly. It lets them fade slowly into the air above it. Everything is gradual here. Nothing changes in sharp lines. The Nile continues its movement without acknowledging this transition. It does not respond to the approach of morning. It does not need to. It is already part of it. A child sleeps lightly now, somewhere between deep rest and the first thin edge of awareness. The body is still, but the mind begins to soften toward the surface of waking without fully arriving there. There is no urgency in this shift. Only transition. only the natural rhythm of returning. In another home, a jar sits near a wall, its outline barely visible in the dim light. It holds the memory of yesterday's carrying, though it does not display it. It simply remains ready. As it always does. As everything here always does. The village itself feels like it is breathing slowly with the world. Inward during rest. Outward toward waking. Without force. Without instruction. The river continues to flow through this entire movement. It does not begin morning. It does not end night. It simply carries both within its endless continuity. And in that continuity, the village finds its own rhythm again and again. Not as something learned once, but as something lived repeatedly until it becomes part of existence itself. The night is still present, but it is no longer fully still. Something has shifted. Something quiet and almost unnoticeable. The beginning of return. The gentle preparation for movement. For light. For the first footsteps that will soon appear again along the path toward water. But for now, nothing is asked. Nothing is required. Everything remains in this soft space between rest and awakening. And in that space, there is a calm that does not need to be understood. Only felt. Only lived. Only allowed to continue. Like water moving through darkness toward morning without ever needing to be guided. There is a moment deep in the night when everything feels balanced in stillness. Not asleep. Not awake. Just held. The village rests in that space without awareness of it. The homes are quiet. The paths are empty. The jars of water remain where they were placed, unchanged in form, unchanged in purpose. Yet nothing about them feels inactive. They are part of something that continues even when nothing moves. The Nile flows beyond the village in the same unbroken way. It does not feel the passage of night or the approach of morning. It simply continues its path through land and time, carrying the same steady presence it has always carried. Inside a home, a person turns slightly in sleep. The movement is small. Almost nothing. But even this small motion exists within the larger rhythm of rest. Breathing continues in a slow, even pattern. Not directed. Not controlled. Just happening. Like the river. Like the cycle of water between river and jar. Outside, the darkness begins to change again. Not noticeably at first. But in a way that slowly softens its edges. The night is no longer at its deepest point. It has begun, without announcement, to shift towards something new. A faint suggestion of light forms far away, not yet reaching the village, but already part of the sky's quiet transformation. The stars remain visible, but they feel slightly less sharp than before. As if distance itself is gently increasing. The earth beneath the village holds the last traces of warmth from the day. It does not release them quickly. It lets them fade slowly into the air above it. Everything is gradual here. Nothing changes in sharp lines. The Nile continues its movement without acknowledging this transition. It does not respond to the approach of morning. It does not need to. It is already part of it. A child sleeps lightly now, somewhere between deep rest and the first thin edge of awareness. The body is still, but the mind begins to soften toward the surface of waking without fully arriving there. There is no urgency in this shift. Only transition. Only the natural rhythm of returning. In another home, a jar sits near a wall, its outline barely visible in the dim light. It holds the memory of yesterday's carrying, though it does not display it. It simply remains ready. As it always does. As everything here always does. The village itself feels like it is breathing slowly with the world. Inward during rest. Outward toward waking. Without force. Without instruction. The river continues to flow through this entire movement. It does not begin morning. It does not end night. It simply carries both within its endless continuity. And in that continuity, the village finds its own rhythm again and again. Not as something learned once, but as something lived repeatedly until it becomes part of existence itself. The night is still present, but it is no longer fully still. Something has shifted. Something quiet and almost unnoticeable. The beginning of return. The gentle preparation for movement. For light. For the first footsteps that will soon appear again along the path toward water. But for now, nothing is asked. Nothing is required. Everything remains in this soft space between rest and awakening. And in that space, there is a calm that does not need to be understood. Only felt. Only lived. Only allowed to continue. Like water moving through darkness toward morning without ever needing to be guided. The night is still present, but it is no longer the same night as before. It has thinned, almost imperceptibly, as if time itself has softened its grip on the world. The village remains quiet. Not fully asleep in the deepest sense now, but resting in a lighter way, as if the boundary between sleep and waking has begun to blur. The Nile continues its flow beyond the land, unchanged, uninterrupted, carrying the same silent rhythm through this delicate transition. It does not announce the coming morning. It does not prepare for it. It simply moves, as it always does, through whatever time is passing above it. Inside the homes, the jars of water remain still. But they no longer feel entirely like objects of the night. They feel closer now to the beginning of movement. To use. To return. To carrying again. A person shifts gently in sleep. The body begins to loosen its deeper rest, not yet awake, but no longer fully held by the stillness of night. Breathing remains slow, steady, and unbroken. But something subtle changes within it. A quiet readiness, not conscious, not chosen, but natural. Like the body remembering what comes next without needing instruction. Outside, the sky is no longer purely dark. A faint, almost invisible change has spread across it. Not light yet. Not day. But something between. A softness that signals the beginning of return. The stars are still present, but they feel less fixed now. As if they are slowly stepping back into distance. The earth beneath the village holds its calm temperature, neither warm nor cold, but gently shifting toward the coming day. Everything exists in transition. Nothing has fully changed. But nothing is exactly the same either. The Nile continues its steady presence through this moment without alteration. It does not mark this threshold. It exists beyond it. A constant line of movement that connects every stage of time without interruption. In one home, a jar is touched lightly in the darkness. Not lifted. Not used. Just acknowledged by a quiet hand that moves without fully waking. A brief contact. A reminder of presence. Then stillness again. This small gesture carries no urgency. It is simply part of the gradual return that is beginning across the village. Outside, the air begins to shift in a way that cannot yet be fully felt, only sensed. A subtle change in pressure. In openness. In the way silence feels less enclosed than before. The village remains quiet, but it is no longer sealed within deep night. It is opening slowly toward morning. Not suddenly. Not visibly. But gently, in layers too soft to define clearly. The river continues its movement through this transition as it always has. It does not belong to night or morning. It belongs to flow. And in that flow, everything else finds its place. Sleep begins to loosen slightly across the village. Not ending. Just thinning. As if the world is preparing to be felt again. The jars remain still, but their presence feels closer now to use. Closer to hands. Closer to movement. Closer to the familiar return that will soon begin again. And somewhere in this quiet space between darkness and light, there is a sense that nothing is waiting impatiently. Nothing is being rushed. Everything is simply approaching its next moment in the same calm rhythm it has always followed. The Nile continues. The village breathes softly. And the morning, still unseen, draws nearer without sound. Like water moving toward its own reflection, patient and endless, without ever needing to arrive quickly. Now the night is no longer deep. It is becoming something else. Not yet morning in full light, but already no longer night in its strongest form. A soft in-between spreads across the sky, where darkness and light meet without conflict. The village remains still, but not frozen in sleep. It feels like everything is slowly preparing itself again, without urgency, without awareness of effort. The Nile continues its movement beyond all of this. It does not mark endings. It does not mark beginnings. It simply flows, carrying the land, the memory, and the rhythm of life forward in a way that never asks for attention. Inside the homes, the jars of water stand quietly in their familiar places. They are unchanged. Yet they feel closer now to the coming day. Closer to hands that will lift them. Closer to cups that will be filled. Closer to footsteps that will once again walk toward the river. A person breathes softly in sleep. But even that sleep is lighter now. Not breaking. Just loosening. As if the body already knows what is coming next. The return. The morning. The beginning of another simple day. Outside, the sky has softened into a pale quiet glow. The stars are fading, not suddenly, but gently, as if stepping away without being asked. The earth beneath the village holds its calm stillness, slowly preparing to receive footsteps again. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is forced. Everything is gradual. Everything is natural. The river continues to move through this moment as it has moved through every moment before it. Unchanged. Unbroken. Unending. It does not carry time as something to measure. It carries it as something to live within. And so the village, resting beside it, does the same. Not in awareness, but in rhythm. Not in thought, but in living. There is no final event here. No sharp conclusion. No clear ending. Only the soft return of light. The quiet promise of another journey. Another carrying. Another day shaped once again by water, by earth, and by the simple movement between them. And as the last edge of night fades into the first breath of morning, everything remains exactly what it has always been. The river flows. The village rests. And life continues. Softly. Endlessly. Like water returning to water, without ever truly leaving.